Right now, Rachel Zegler's Snow White is in the pits of hell. This film was meant to reintroduce a classic Disney princess, and instead it became the most politically divisive movie of the decade. And now people are blaming one woman. It somehow managed to score an aggregate score of 2.1 on Letterboxd, 41% on the tomato meter, and a crazy score I've never seen before for a major movie, a 1.5 on IMDb. I say somehow, but let's be real, there are dozens of reasons. That film has burned a hole in my mind that will never get back. But the thing is, why is all of the blame going to Rachel Zegler? Yes, she's a very outspoken woman, and to be honest, this is who Hollywood has been raising, inspiring and pushing films for over the last decade and a half. Because I would actually argue we're witnessing a decade's worth of cultural shifts crashing down in a Thanos level inevitable moment, and we've been headed for a crash like this for a very long time. We've influenced it, we've made it, and we're living it. Just look at the Hunger Games. A quiet female from the hood of Panem brought into the limelight, finds her voice and becomes a ruler of the movement that changes everything for everyone. Think about Divergent, another strong female living in a world divided by classes and personalities dictated by scientific star signs. By the way, if anyone asks what time you were born, sprint before they start giving you crystals. But in that film, the lead finds out she can exhibit more than one emotion because this isn't the 1960s and the population aren't the equivalent of housewives. With modern day politics pushing for women to have more autonomy over their bodies, and with the oncoming reality of a nation like the USA having its first female president, Rachel Zegler encapsulates many of the idols that 15 years ago were being pushed to the forefront, but now have begun getting condemned. Independence, equality, and unwavering justice. We were all rooting for these people at the time, so what's happened? Has our culture shifted? As we saw with Star Wars Acolyte, which was, in my opinion, chaotic and canon breaking, was heavily criticized for various reasons, most notably a strong female lead and a writer who never saw Star Wars to add a fresh spin. Listen, I've never flown a plane. That does not mean I should become a pilot because I like the sky. I don't. I have a fear of heights. You get what I'm saying? Then you have Disney's She-Hulk, which I thought was okay, but led to the moniker the MCU. Of course, Rachel Zegler is her own person, but should she really be getting all the flack for Snow White's failure? Because I've done the research, and even without the politics, not every film is hot. Take for example Tom Hanks' Pinocchio. That's currently sitting at a solid 27% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's from critics and fans. Then you have rumors of a feud, real world conflicts, calls for boycotts, and just a generally bumpy story that may be equally to blame. I'm Markndrew. If you're already feeling where I'm going, hit follow and leave a comment because we're about to get deep, and I want you to draw your own conclusion after I add actual non-clickbaity perspective, facts, and go from the start. I'm going to cover remake history, Hollywood politics, real world conflicts, and a fuse which oozed through the screen. So please hit follow and let's begin. Disney had begun dabbling in remaking some of its most popular titles into live action, and in 2010 we got Alice in Wonderland, which was directed by longtime collaborator Tim Burton, same guy who brought us Nightmare Before Christmas. Is that a Halloween or is that a Christmas film? And it starred Helen Bonham Carter and Johnny Depp, who just create magic anytime they link up, let's be real. I'll never forget when I first saw Sweeney Todd. Listen, me and that barber, we had eye contact. But that alone grossed $1 billion worldwide on a $200 million budget, and it proved a few things. One, people were willing to go to the cinema and watch remakes of their childhood classics, and two, Disney's catalogue, which had just been sitting on the shelf, actually had two lives. Once the story faded out of memory existence or new buzz had begun, they could be repurposed and brought to life for the next generation, and that's exactly what happened, but riskier. The other thing to add is a lot of their titles were taken off the Brothers Grimm and transformed in their own way, so copyright plays a small role in this, but really it would just be copying the likeness. So I guess them making these films is just a renewal of that, but IP runs out after like 100 years, so. Rather than just throw a random princess at the screen, Disney ran a very interesting experiment. What if they could humanize their most villainous characters and make audiences fall in love with them? Their first candidate for this test was Maleficent, which had actually been pitched back in the early 2000s with Burton to direct. Because Wicked was getting popular on Broadway, there was a desire to paint a villain in the same light as Elphaba, but through animation. Over the decade, the film would be shelved and renewed, with Burton eventually dropping out. But once the film released with Angelina's crazy cheekbones, it was a smash, with $750 million globally. Now, put yourself in Disney's shoes. Would you stop, or would you keep pumping the remakes? Because clearly there is an audience demand for them, and that's why in 2015 they released Cinderella, which was another commercial banger. But in that same year, we got a movement that would change the way Hollywood operated, and boiling points exploded. If you're enjoying, please hit follow. 2015 was marked by the Oscars So White movement. The year they were honoring was 2014, when films like Selma, The Raid 2, The Equalizer, Ride Along, and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 dropped. Remember Jamie Foxx? But it's my birthday. Not to say that they were groundbreaking films, but some of these are still relevant in conversation today, and still there were no nominees. So this movement made Hollywood think about diversity, and change began, which eventually kicked off the Me Too movement, where women spoke out about hardship in the workplace and mistreatment, whether being marginalized or taken advantage of. According to an Academy press release, by 2020, the amount of female members went from 25% to 33% in 2015, and people of color went from 8% to 19%, because policy called for actions, not words. As part of Disney's policy, they released a corporate social responsibility report in 2020, showing they were pushing for more diversity, inclusion, and representation. On page 15 of the report, it reads, Disney's platforms and brands are united by the drive to tell powerful stories. We have the opportunity and responsibility to create authentic, unforgettable stories, experiences, and products that reflect the diversity of cultures and backgrounds of the consumers and the world we live in. It's important that when people engage with Disney content and products, they see themselves and their experiences reflected in our stories. Disney is committed to building a more inclusive company while fostering a more equitable entertainment industry. Our initiatives, including the Disney Launchpad, Shorts Incubator, and the Future Skills Program, help us to employ and support a diverse array of voices in front of and behind the camera. In short, racism and sexism were leaving the building, yeah? So Disney were actually putting in the work, and it began showing even more in their content. Nikki Caro, a female director, was given the helm for Mulan, which released in 2020, at the time making her just 1 out of 2 to ever being given a $100 million budget, where she actively used her platform to speak out on the lack of leadership opportunities for women in Hollywood during 2019's Power of Inclusion Summit. For context, Hollywood got backlash for casting roles outside of appropriate ethnicities, so we had films like Exodus, Gods and Kings, where Christian Bale played Moses, a character who would have been Middle Eastern. Then you have 2016's The Great Wall, which had Matt Damon playing the lead defending the Great Wall of China, which got hatred because many people, and even stars of Chinese descent, spoke out of being tired of the white savior complex. Everyone's welcome on this page, please know that. Which Matt Damon defended across interviews, asking people to have patience with the film as it was an East meets West collaboration event, but the poster featuring just his face, it made things worse. So for Disney's Mulan, they made a conscious effort to cast those of Chinese descent, whether generations prior or directly from there. Of course, there was still diversity amongst crew, but was it enough? So in the background, controversies were brewing, and I think that was a key indicator of politics playing a larger role in the way fans perceive films and the stars within them. The first is the fact that Mulan was filmed in Xinjiang. If I butchered that, just roast me, it's cool. A location reported to have human rights abuse against the Uyghur Muslims, which Disney made worse when they thanked the authority in the credits. Then the lead actress Liu Yifei supported the Hong Kong police while the nation had faced mass protests across 2019 and 2020, and resistors were met with tear gas, rubber projectiles, and reports of excess brutality. It led to the boycott Mulan movement in the West, but even in China, they felt the film misrepresented parts of their culture and was semi-disrespectful, if not fully. From this point on, making a live-action film had the capacity to offend anyone or everyone at any point about anything, which raises the question, how do we make a safe film? That's a question we still don't have an answer for. You can't do anything. You can't breathe no more. Somehow it gets worse though, because when Disney revealed the cast of The Little Mermaid, there was backlash over the casting of the super talented Halle Bailey. So people were fuming that Ariel was black and called it race swapping. So what would happen when you remove an entire identity from a film and its sentiment? Well, Snow White was daring to find out. So landing the role of Snow White in 2020, Rachel Zegler got on screens and proudly declared that the film would be a reimagining of the family classic. The prince would not be getting a random kiss from the princess, and Snow White would evidently be of Latina descent. This would change her origin song, where it said she has skin as white as snow, and she would instead get her name due to a snowstorm. Rachel would then go on to say that she's only watched Snow White once, which some argued was actually quite disrespectful to the film, and there were raised concerns about how likely the film was to succeed. But the repeatedly outspoken nature of the soon-to-be Disney princess was already souring public opinion. On the other side of things, some communities online doubted that Gal Gadot could pull off an iconic role or carry her weight in the film, pointing at movies like the Justice League to cement their viewpoints of poor line delivery and acting in general. But there was a sleeping storm that would upend the dynamic of the Queen and the princess. Previously, Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler seemed like the best of friends with unmatched chemistry. Just go and watch any of their interviews. They seemed like they had crazy affection for each other before filming even began. But on October October 7th, 2023, Hamas attacked an Israeli festival in a conflict that would divide and still has divided much of the planet, with some taking the side of Palestine, arguing that they are the victims of decades of aggression from Israel, while some claim that Israel's force is justifiable as they try to rescue hostages. Gal Gadot was formerly Israeli military before becoming an actress and so naturally supported them, writing, "My heart breaks, my country is at war. I worry for my family, my friends, I worry for my people. This is a vicious cycle that has been going on for far too long. Israel deserves to live as a free and safe nation." And not everyone was happy about her saying that, with one person saying, "Gal's sentiment is worse than the tone-deaf Imagine video from last year. All the celebrities sang Imagine. It was too much." Arguing there was land theft and military occupation. Because of this, many people began disliking Gal for her views and stance on the conflict in the region, with calls to even boycott the film. Meanwhile, on the other side of the spectrum, Rachel Zegler had nothing but support for Palestine, sharing posts and words to her socials and stories on different platforms. Then it was reported by outlets that Mark Platt, producer of Snow White, had actually flew out to Rachel Zegler in order to convince her to delete what she was doing and posting online, which Rachel outright refused to do, with an insider reportedly saying she didn't understand the repercussions of her actions as far as what that meant for the film, for Gal, for anyone. So it seems like by this point, blame was already getting piled onto Zegler despite what she was doing being the equivalent to Gal's actions. Actually, Gal got up during a conference and made claims that people were attacking her belief system due to protests around the world, many calling for ceasefires. Then, right after Trump was elected in the 2024 elections, Rachel posted, "May Trump supporters never know peace," and other things I can't repeat. So for a lot of people, if they hadn't already picked a side, this was sort of the nail in the coffin. And this is exactly why you don't discuss politics at work or on dates. We now have conflict between the two leads, with them both making each other's side want to boycott the film. So that's Republicans boycotting, pro-Israel boycotting, pro-Palestine boycotting, anti-feminist boycotting, anti-diversity groups boycotting. This is like bingo from hell. But it doesn't stop there. Peter Dinklage, famous for playing Tyrion Lannister on Game of Thrones, had been very outspoken against the film for its portrayal of the wolves. The fact that they're living in the forest in isolation, working minds, and yet Disney was able to change the entire story for Snow White, but not this harsh element, infuriated the actor. Many from that community actually thought that 7 jobs would be created and were excited to fill the roles, just for casting to completely go down the route of CGI, and rather than cast stars who would have loved the payday, they went with actors who could just do the voiceovers. So let's add another group to the boycott list. Snow White was pretty much in an unshiftable position, with Rachel Zegler taken to the internet to say that the film would be #1 in the world despite her actions, not before being made to give an apology about her political statements though. Zegler thanked the crew for their help while not sharing a single photo of Gal, and the press being uninvited to the red carpet. We were at the breaking point of one single interview causing even more boycotts, so it's making sense. Yet, on the weekend of the 21st of March, the film only made $43 million in the USA and $56 million globally, according to IMDb. The film's reimagining paints everyone to be equal in every way, and no matter how hard they work, they will share resources equally, which for an American film isn't quite politically aligned with most of the audience, as technically those are actually communist values and in the past have led to dictatorships. In actuality, the way Snow White would lead and the way the Queen would lead would be exactly the same. One just comes with tinsel. The prince is now a thief like Robin Hood, and the film wastes time bringing character development to the wars with relatable tropes like having a stutter, anger issues, and finding identity, which takes it quite far away from the happy fairy tale many of us grew up with, and it makes it a very political film. So is it fair to say Rachel Zegler is the cause of Snow White failing? I've made up my mind. You have all the research I've done here. Sound off in the comment section, let me know what you think. But yeah, I'm Markndrew, and if you like that video, I'd appreciate a like, follow or share. And if you really want to help out and allow me to keep making content, feel free to check my links and donate what you can or buy something from my shop. Be sure to check these other videos too. I'm Markndrew, and this is The Big Breakdown. I'll see you soon.